Hello, everyone. You're watching Onward with Onrie Live. I'm your host, Onrie Kompan. Thanks for tuning in. This week, I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that I think we all face in any business, which is, there's definitely high moments when, things are going great and you're busy and things are moving forward and you're making lots of money and things are headed in the right direction. And then there's these moments when things get really slow and you're wondering how you're going to get through the next day, and whether or not you'll be able to continue your business. Those moments tend to come up quite often when you're a business owner, and especially if you're in the comic book business, because it's such a volatile environment. And today I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I do when I get into my low moments. In fact, I would actually consider right now to be one of those periods where it's kind of like a low moment for me. And I don't necessarily look at a low period as like a bad thing. I think every business owner goes through this. I think everybody goes through low moments. And these are times when you can really start to improve yourself and figure out ways to move forward. So some of the things that I've been doing is reading a lot lately. And I've been reading a lot because I'm currently doing research on the next arc of Yisun Shin, which is called Hunter and Destroyer. And, earlier this week, I've just been reading this big book here. It's called The Indian War, and a bunch of other books as well to help kind of prepare me for what I need to do. And I think the research is always the most difficult aspect of any project you're doing. It doesn't matter if it's historical or not. Every project requires some sort of research so that you can relate to a larger audience. And particularly with this last arc of Yisun Shin, it's focused on the last year of the Indian War, and that's not an area that I've ever been really familiar with, because in the last year of the war, a lot of things were happening outside of Yisun Shin's actions. So, there was a lot more land encounters and a lot more involvement from the Chinese military. And doing all this research and reading all this stuff is difficult because I have to absorb all this information. I have to look at what I can use and what I can't use, and some stuff is really good, and I want to put it inside the book, but I realize that I don't have enough page space to do that. So, that's the challenge of being in these low moments and I consider it that because you're not making any money at this point. You're in development. You're in research mode, and you have to make a ton of decisions. And this is one of the reasons why I have an editor and co-writer. Is because I have somebody who I can bounce ideas off of. And because we've been working together for so long, it's given me a lot better instinct on, what I can and can't use in certain projects. So, when you're in these periods, you have to keep yourself busy. Even if you're not bringing home a paycheck, you have to find ways to advance and move yourself forward. I think that's the biggest challenge. And another thing that can be kind of demoralizing is seeing, how much more progress people around you are seemingly making. But you have to keep in mind that when you're busy, everybody else is looking at you like you're making all the progress and they're standing still. So, and it's better not to look at what other people are doing overall and with that kind of perception. I think it's better to look at other people who are succeeding and learn from them and see what you can do, what you can borrow from their success and apply to your own strategy, without blatantly ripping them off, of course, but, just kind of taking those ideas and applying them to your strategy. And, this is how everything works out. I mean, if you look at entertainment in particular, every movie that comes out is a borrowed idea from, something else. In fact, some of the best movies ever made were all based off of novels. So, and if you look at all the success from these new comic book movies, they all come from a source material, which was the comics. And the same thing here with Yisun Shin, and I have to watch the TV show too, and it's just sitting there and watching a TV show, it sounds fun, but, when you have family to provide for and, you have to be making bigger moves. And it's not always easy to pause yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to take all this pressure off myself and focus on this because I'm looking at the end result. I'm looking to achieve something that's going to be much, much greater. And it's going to take a long time, but I'm doing it because that's what I need to be doing. So that's something I always tell myself in order to kind of get me through these little periods. And I'm of course expecting things to pick up, and things are moving forward. So I wouldn't say, like in my case, I'm in like a super low period, but like anybody else, I'm human, and I tend to look at what other people are doing at times and think to myself, man, I wish I had done this, or man, it'd be great if I could jump on board that that project, or oh, that's a good idea, why didn't I think of it first? You have to give yourself credit for the fact that you're thinking that way. And it's kind of funny because a couple weeks ago, about a month ago, I was talking with a very good friend of mine, Jim Salerkrupp. He's the editor-in-chief of Paper Cuts, which is a publisher of kids comics and other cool stuff. And while we were talking, Jim's been a friend of mine for a very long time, and I tend to keep a really close relationship with him because I have a lot of respect for him. And I was talking to him about a month ago, and I was expressing all my concerns about where things are headed for my business, and what I need to do to grow, and not being sure about what's going to happen tomorrow. And he said that it's because of the fact that I was worried about these things that I would succeed. And he goes, that may not mean much to you now, but it will once you get there. And I think that's something that you need to give yourself credit for too. And of course, there are people who say it's, you can worry all you want, but unless you're doing something, look, if you're making progress each day, if you're keeping a list of things that you need to do and you're checking them off consistently, you are making progress. You are doing what you need to do. And you also have to live in reality too, and understand that if you make mistakes, there are consequences, and you just do your best to learn as you do that. I see a bunch of videos on my Facebook feed of people who succeed by failing, and I look at this, me coming up on Facebook Live as a failure, and I'm failing myself for it. I'm pushing myself to do this, even though it's not something I'm particularly comfortable with. When I appear in public, or whenever I'm like talking to people, it's always because it's always when I have something to talk about, and I feel like if you don't have something to talk about, don't talk at all. And that's just my perception of things, but this is why I tend to remain neutral regarding politics and other issues, is because I don't want to insult any of my audience. People who are reading my book, I have a lot of respect for them, and people who are looking at what I'm doing publicly are also considered my fans. So I have to be mindful of everyone, and it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, what your religious beliefs are, or what your gender is, or where you fall politically. It does not matter to me. What matters to me is that when you come to me and you read my books or whatever, that you are able to leave all of that behind. And I don't feel comfortable going online and telling you all of my thoughts and crying to you about all my problems. I want to maintain a positive image. So it's really, it's tough for me to get out here and do this, but I know that if I don't do it, I can't make the next step forward, which is, I don't even know yet. And that's a scary thought. But you have to, as long as I keep myself on that schedule to constantly come out there and do something like this, to get out and push those boundaries, I know that eventually I'll get better at talking to people publicly. I know that at some point maybe I'll get my own TV show. I mean, I don't even know what it could lead to. But you have to always be ready to take those risks and not be afraid of what can happen if, say, you do something brilliant and people don't respond to it. If you do something brilliant and people don't respond to it, you just got to push harder. And a great example of that is I can give you was something that actually happened to me very recently. So earlier in the week, I was thinking about reviews and whether or not they really have an impact on my product and how it sells, because nothing I've done recently, Mark's or the Yi Sun-shin Fallen Avenger graphic novel, a lot of that stuff hasn't been reviewed by any big sites. And even if it was reviewed by big sites, I'm not sure that would necessarily get people to want to pick up the book. I mean, they would give me a lot of blurbs that I could use to promote the book, and I think that's why reviews are such a wonderful thing to have. And it also gives you that added exposure. It's like all of a sudden there's another site that has information about the stuff I'm working on, and it's all great when you get a good review, and it gives you that momentary high. But the thing is that it fades very quickly, because in comics the market is very saturated, and there's so much stuff coming out on a weekly basis that it's hard to keep the attention on you, especially when you're independent. So you just have to understand that it's everybody is allowed to have their moment in the spotlight, including you. And it's okay if your stuff isn't getting reviewed, or if it's not on all these big sites. It's okay if you're not a New York Times best-selling author. What matters is that you get out there and people are enjoying your work. When I go to a convention, when I go to my next convention, I know that I'm going to meet a ton of people out there who have never heard of Yi Sun-shin before and are going to get turned on to it. And that's how I like to be turned on to things myself. Whenever I discover a new book, like I just started reading this book right here, The Ink Cal. Earlier this week, I asked people if they could give me some recommendations of books that were illustrated by a very famous French artist whose name is Mobius. Some people told me, the general consensus was pick up this book. So I got it. And as I've been reading it, I didn't spoil it for myself by reading what the book was about. I just decided, you know what, I'm going to pick this book up and I'm going to read it. I'm going to figure out what it's about as I go on. And I enjoy that. I like being turned on to new things unexpectedly. I don't necessarily need everybody around me to tell me that I need to buy something or that I need to check something out, And I think that's kind of what I like most about what I'm doing, is that I don't need to have that public attention all the time. And, it gives me that sense of ownership of what I'm doing too. It's like I don't need to be talked about all the time to sell my work. I know that I can do it. I know that I'm in charge of it. And of course, when I get it, I'm not going to complain either, because having that press and having that attention is always a good thing. But it's not a determining factor of whether or not you are capable of succeeding. And just because somebody else is achieving a higher level of success at a particular moment than say you are, doesn't necessarily mean that is that's not bad for you. You're only seeing it as it's bad for you because you're seeing it from your point of view. But if you step outside of yourself, no one is comparing you to that person that you in your mind are seeing as a potential threat or whatever. And the truth is no one is really a threat to you except for yourself. Your greatest opponent in your business, your biggest enemy is yourself, because you're always judging yourself. You always have to be critical of yourself. You always have to be asking yourself, it's great that I'm living my dream, but am I actually making progress? Am I actually getting from point A to point B, or am I just, living some fantasy? And when you are constantly battling yourself in that regard, it's very hard to just, say, you know what, enough's enough. I feel in my heart, and this is what I need to be doing. I know that the actions I'm taking right now are exactly what I need to be doing, and, push forward. So, those are just some of the things that, I think about. And another thing I do is I keep a list of objectives that I need to complete on a weekly basis. And that's what allows me to check off stuff. And that's what gives me confidence. That's what gets me charged up and always makes me look forward to starting a new week. Every Sunday I sit down for about 15 minutes and I come up with my agenda for the week, and I look at the things that I need to get done. I need to make sure that, my team is working. I need to make sure that, all my bills are paid. I need to look at ordering up new business cards because I'm running low on business cards, and I'm running low on T-shirts, so I'm going to be printing up new T-shirts. And looking at stuff and figuring out whether or not certain things make sense to invest in. Setting up for new conventions. This week I just sent in my application for an artist alley table at Boston Comic-Con this summer. So I'm hoping I'll get in and that I'll be able to hop on over there because I really like Boston a lot. And while I was on vacation, I was doing the same thing. I was meeting my objectives even while I was on vacation. And really the only thing I was able to do while I was on vacation was read. But reading is important because it helps you expand your mind and it helps you figure out what you're going to do next. And it's important to look at other people who are successful and learn from them. Like I was mentioning last time I was on the last episode, I was reading a book about a special forces army dude who, wrote a book about about leadership. And, it's a really fantastic read. And, I actually know someone who trained with him. So it's pretty cool. So, those are some things to think about as you progress forward with what it is you're doing. And, so going forward, I think that one of the things I'm going to keep doing is trying to make those goals and trying to set higher goals too. I also keep long-term objectives. Like, I have to make sure right now, one of my long-term objectives right now is to reprint the first Easton Chin graphic novel. So, I need to make sure that project is moving forward too. And you'll be surprised once you start thinking about what can I do, what needs to be done, you'll come up with a whole list of shit to do. You will never be without work if you think about things you can do. And if my list of objectives, I try and handle at least 15 projects a week. And if, let's say it's the weekend and I've only come up with like, say, 5 projects, I come up with new shit. I mean, that's what you do as a business owner. You start to think about new ideas, you jot them down, you go for things and you try and see what you can achieve and what you can't. And it's all about that perpetual thought of going forward. And as humans, that's what we're propelled to do. That, this is why our feet are pointed forward. We have to move forward. So as long as you're thinking that way of not limiting yourself, but expanding yourself, you will always have work to do and you will always be making progress. And eventually you'll get to a point where you can find satisfaction in the things that you're doing. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. It really means a lot to me. We're on our 6th episode now, and I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing on this show. But I'm going to be back here next week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all here. And I got Brian K. Morris here. He said, tell your wife about it, and what I did in Cookies kicking my ass with encouragement and more tasks. See, my wife gives me a lot of tasks too. So on top of everything I have to do for the business, I also got things that I got to take care of around the house because I'm a father of 2. And a husband as well, and there's also that pressure, and life is always gonna kick you in the ass that way. So I'm assuming that's what you wanted to say, Brian. But that's a great point. Thanks for mentioning it. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. I'll be back on here. Thanks for tuning in, and hopefully as time goes on, you'll see some improvement in how I come on here and talk with you guys. I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot. Onward to victory.